thank you all for being here early, because we're starting a few minutes early. My name is Tyler. I am the Environmental Programs Coordinator with the Town of Flower Mound. So this is through the Environmental Services Department. We've been extremely fortunate to have a very supportive library that lets us have these classes here and helps us host them. So we are very, very fortunate and very, very grateful and thankful to our library folks for getting this room set up for us and letting us be here and letting me ramble on all the time. So massive thanks to them. And of course, massive thanks to our speaker today. Fantastic speaker, and we are so privileged that he was willing to do this for us. So CBS 11's Jeff Ray, senior meteorologist. Yep. He has been with CBS 11 since 2010. And is one of the primary reporters for the Climate Connection segment, and also from, as what I understand, responsible for starting the Gardening 101 series and helping, spread the information for all of us out there. So anyway, thank you all for being here, and thank you very much to Mr. Jeff Ray for being here. I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Tyler.
Yep.
She actually approached me, gosh, Tyler, was it a year ago?
Just about.
About come do Earth Day. And I said, well, the station might have me doing something on Earth Day. And as it turns out, this was what they had in mind. So before we get started with what I'm talking about, and forgive me because I'm literally talking to you while someone's talking to me. But Ed over here, my friend Ed, he and I have worked together for 13 years now. We're going to go live at about 7:15, have they told you? Have they updated the time? So, as I left the station, it was going to be somewhere around 7:15. We'll see. It's television. We'll see what happens. But they're going to go toss to me live, so I'm going to be in the middle of my talk, and I'm just going to suddenly say, wait a minute, and then we'll start doing it back and forth with Doug at the studio, and I'm going to explain to him what we're doing here tonight, that I'm here talking at the Flower Mound Library, Public Library. Let's see if I can remember that. And we're talking about how the climate's changing in your backyard. So Ed, you're gonna tell me when to put this back in my ear so I can not have to listen to a conversation while I'm doing that. This is the first time we've ever done this, by the way. I've done this talk for about 2.5 years now. First off, has anyone been through this talk? Oh, good. It's getting more and more rare when I have a large group that no one has seen it before, because I've been doing it for over 2 years. Mostly to garden clubs, civic organizations. It's been a wide range of groups now that I've talked to about climate and what's been going on in North Texas. As Tyler was telling you, I'm a senior meteorologist, which is the nice way of them saying I'm the one with the gray hair and the oldest one. I've been doing a gardening segment for a long time now. We got over 150 episodes. Right now it's actually on pause because the command came from high that we're going to start doing Climate Connection, so now I do a Climate Connection story. I don't know if you were watching us today, but one of my stories ran today on the U.S. bird population. Songbird populations have been diminishing rapidly over the last couple of decades, and the story was about some local efforts that are being done to help the local bird population. But that's just one of the many climate stories that we run. We run one about every 2 weeks or so. So I'm heavily involved with those right now. And as soon as I can kind of get ahead of them, I'll go back to also doing the gardening stories. I was hired as basically a severe weather meteorologist at CBS 11. This is market number 4, and we're a CBS O&O station. So it's actually it was a big career move for me, and it was a big move to move into my family into DFW. I am certainly glad I did it, but my primary mission at my station is to protect you during severe weather, which I take to heart. I find that job the most noble thing that I do, other than be a father to my son and a husband to my wife. But the job that I do during severe weather, you usually don't see me, only sometimes briefly. You'll hear my voice a lot, because there'll be a meteorologist at what we call the green screen. To you, it's a map. But he's talking about he or she is talking about severe weather. And The radar is being manipulated while he's talking, and that's me. I'm handling the radar. I'm the one who reads the radar signatures. I'm actually looking at 3 different radar systems and trying to get his attention every now and then if something of significance is happening. So that's my primary role there. I cover the weekends as well and any other shifts where people are gone. So let's talk about what we came here to talk about. We're fortunate here in the North Texas area, especially the DFW area. We have a very long climate history. It started in this federal building in downtown Fort Worth in 1898. They started doing daily observations, and starting in 1909, more importantly, started doing hourly observations. We have a record that goes back now 125 years, and daily, hourly information that goes back since 1909. That's very helpful if you want to do a long-range climate study of any one location. It has been here at this, where that blue spot is, at the DFW airport, since the airport opened. It was about a mile from here, starting in 1953. So we've also been fortunate that we've had some very good placement with the sensors, even though it moved from a downtown area, which in 1909 wasn't much of a downtown, but into an airport, which is somewhat favored location. Anyway, this is a spot where every 6 minutes there's a series of weather observations made by a series of instruments that fed to the computer in Silver Springs, Maryland. There's 3,000 sites like this across the country. This is the backbone of weather forecasting. We need to know what is happening now, not only at the surface, but all through the layers of the atmosphere. It's all fed into a computer and then put forward in time, 15 minutes at a block. And this is how we get numerical forecasting. It sounds impossible, I know, but the computer power is incredible. The Silver Springs computer has a sister in Colorado Springs, and they happen to be the 2 most powerful daily operational computers that we know of in the United States. We suspect that the military has some that are even more powerful, but they're extraordinarily powerful computers that help us forecast the weather. So when I got here, my background already was in climatology. So I immediately started feeling very fortunate to work at a place that had a 125-year weather history. I immediately started diving into this database and helped develop some software to help me kind of look at it very carefully in many different directions. And I can summarize what I've taken away from looking at that record, that it is definitely getting warmer here. The growing seasons are definitely getting longer, maybe as much as 3 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks on both sides, so significantly. And that extreme weather events are getting more common. Or when I do this talk in the schools, high schools, which I did just last week, I can sum it up. The hots are getting hotter, the colds are getting colder, and the rains are getting bigger. All right. So if you're a gardener, are there any gardeners in here, by the way? Good. Welcome to my tribe. As you know, that we've got into a new plant hardiness zone again. Normally these are updated about every 30 years, and they've been updating now every decade. We are now all 8s across the board. Literally when I moved here, we were 7s, and now we're 8s. Well, we're 8B, which means, as you know, if you're a gardener, you put a plant in the ground, it can handle 15 degrees for the coldest night in the winter, survive, and then come spring, you've still got a plant sitting there. You don't have to go buy it twice, right? So you try to plant for your zone. That's all the different zones, all 13 of them across the United States. They're A's and B's. Texas actually has more zones than any state, save for California, because California has mountains, or significant mountains, I should say. And y'all all know this part. Again, this is a talk, this particular version I gave at a local high school at environmental science class. So I want to talk about this briefly before we get into some other stuff about the hardiness zone map, the new update. This is a look at all the seasons, the 4 seasons, and how they've changed from the last century, 1900 to 1999, to from 2000 to present. And you can see how they've all warmed, but spring and summer have warmed the most. And here's really my point here. What you're seeing is since 2000, all the Decembers. So 5 of them were blue, below normal, 16 were above normal. And then it's almost even in January. We've had almost as many cold Januaries as warm Januaries, just a few more. This is the only month of all of them that's like this. There have been more cold Februaries than warm Februaries. And the easiest way to visualize this, as I explained it as a meteorologist, is that our winters are warmer, especially the early part of the winter. And that warm air is holding back the cold air, like a dam. It's just say, no, don't come down here. It's literally changing the direction of the jet stream, holding it to keep the cold air from coming down. We have changed the composition of our atmosphere. We have not changed the angle of the sun. So above the Arctic Circle, as you know, for half the year, the sun does not rise. That cold air just keeps getting colder all winter long. Eventually, it comes down here. And when it finally gets down here, it's like record cold. Because your ideal winter is that really cold air is vented periodically throughout the winter, that we would get a shot of cold air about every week or so that really cold air up there doesn't sit there and just get colder and colder and colder. It just kind of lets out little waves of cold. But instead what's happening is it's being bottled up most of the winter. And then finally, by the time you get towards the end of winter in the month of February, we get hit with really cold weather. So they changed us to 8B. 8B says at 15 degrees, your plants are fine. Anything below that, you might lose your plant across the winter. I circled all the temperatures, all the times at DFW Airport, which, by the way, in the big picture is kind of one of the warm places across the Metroplex. All the times it got below 15 degrees that winter. And what I want you to notice, look at the last 10 years. So that trend that I was explaining, that perversely the warmer the winter is, the colder the colds get, is showing up as was described to me actually almost 20 years ago, that there's a chance across the Midwest and the Central Plains this trend could hold for a while, that you get really cold outbreaks of air. Why? Because your winter is getting warmer. And it's playing out here at the DFW area. So if I impart any lesson from this, it's that I would continue to plant 7A or 7B. I would plan on nights continuing to hit down to 10 degrees at least. And keep in mind that it was just 2 winters ago, it got down to -2 and wiped out a bunch of plants. Has anyone seen any Indian hawthorns lately? I saw them at one of the big box stores this spring. They were selling Indian hawthorns. And I wanted to stand there and just wave people off of them, like, no, don't, just keep moving, nothing to see here. Because one of the bitter lessons of that particular winter was there was not an Indian hawthorn that survived hardly. So I'll say the good news for gardeners, the growing season is getting longer, and if you're willing to deal with the threat of a few freezes and use your frost cloth and your water and protect those plants for maybe 1 night or 2 nights, man, the growing season can get really long. In January, this is a perfect example. It was just this year. It was January 23rd. We got down to 28 degrees. We didn't have another freeze until February, 3rd week of February. Only 1 freeze in all of February. 1 night got down to 28 degrees again. So you could have planted in the last week of January, protected for 1 night, and your growing season would have started in January. So, that is now you're adding literally 6 weeks to your growing cycle for your spring greens. This is a great strategy. First off, the thing about your winters is that the most noticeable thing is kind of, as I touched on this, when it gets cold, it gets very cold for a very short period of time. Does anyone here have a generation already here in Flower Mound or surrounding area? So your grandparents lived here? Yeah, I know, we're in North Texas. So, in your grandparents' time, if they had lived here, they would tell you in general that somewhere before Christmas or right around Christmas it got cold, and it pretty much stayed cold to sometime in mid-February. And that was winter here. And there would be a few warm days, but there'd be a lot of cold days. But as a whole, it was winter. If you've been here in the last 10 years, you're kind of wondering what happened to that. Because we get kind of spring weather here, and then it gets really cold. And it could get cold for maybe 4 days, 5 days, and then we're back to spring. So that's kind of the new norm of what winter is like here now. Not, if you look at the record, not what it was back in especially the 20s and 30s and 40s. So we're getting shorter cold streaks, and of course we're getting fewer number of freezes. This last winter, we had 15 freezes. You get about 30 usually every winter, and we got half that this winter. So freezes are getting less common. Winter weirding is what I call it, because it is getting weird. Think of December 2021. Does anyone remember statistics? Because this is where everybody glazes over and like excuses themselves to go get some tea or something. But so in December 2021, we had an average temperature that was 61 degrees. So you take the high and the low each day and add it all up and divide it by 62, and that's your average temperature for the month, okay? The average for that December is 61.2. Normal is 48.1. It was warmer than your average October, that December of 21. It was warmer than your average October. In fact, it would have been the 10th warmest November ever. The second warmest December ever was 54 degrees average temperature, so that's a 70-degree difference, which is 10 times the margin of any other difference between 1 and 2 for that month. Well, the warmest month versus the second warmest month, the average is only 0.7 degrees, and this one was 7-degree difference. And the reason I ramble on about this is because of that. You take any group of numbers, and in this case, we have 125 average temperatures of December. You can explain it using standard deviations that 66% of the group of those numbers will fall in a standard deviation of 1, and that as you get further into the tailings, those numbers become more and more outliers, rare. And that number, this one, this 61.2, is a standard deviation basically of almost -4. Now, climatologically, this, when you hear us say 100-year flood, oh, that was a once in a 100-year flood. When you hear us say, this is a once in 500-year flood, and I'm saying that was there. So it shouldn't even happened. We had a December that was the 11th warmest November on record. So it got a little weird. Here's the warmest winter since 2000, and I'm going to show you this one for every season. By the way, this is the software I was telling you about, where I have all this weather information in, and I'm allowed to slice and dice it. But I highlighted everything since this century, and you're going to see in all these charts an overrepresentation since the year 2000 of warmest ever. And these are the 20 warmest winters, including the top 2. Spring is starting earlier. You've probably noticed this in your backyard. It's this is what I was wanting to talk about. I got so excited when I moved here in 2011, the hottest year on our record, that there were 3 growing seasons here. You know, I moved here from my hometown of Nashville, and there was like 1 growing season, but here there's 3. You can do a greens season that's in the spring. You plant around Groundhog Day, and you harvest end of May before the heat really sets in and everything bolts. So you can do your spinaches, your kales, your chars, and parsley. A lot of greens do very well in that window. Beets. So I immediately started doing that. I got so excited about that. And this has actually become a really successful strategy here, because if you look, since Groundhog Day, that 6-week period has just been getting warmer and warmer. So I would highly recommend it if you want to get into gardening, or you are gardening, you want to try to grow some more food. This is a great window to grow greens now. You start planting around Groundhog Day, and you're probably going to have a really good crop. It may wait a couple more weeks, but you can even start your tomatoes earlier now. Of the 3 warmest springs, they've all happened in the last 15 years. Do you have any high schoolers in here? I didn't look around, no. You guys aren't in high school. No, don't. Keep your hands down. No, but if you're in high school, you've seen all the warmest springs we've ever had here, the top 3. But 20 of the warmest springs at DFW, 12 have happened since the year 2000. Summer, or as I like to refer it, the gate of which all our plants must pass. There's no sense in putting anything in the ground here if it can't survive the summer. I mean, don't try. Don't give yourself heartbreak, because you will be doomed to failure. The summers are getting more intense too, so if you don't have a plant that can handle hot, dry conditions, I am telling you, don't put it in the ground here. You will have to baby it, you'll have to overwater it. You would just drive you crazy trying to get it through probably all of July and all of August. So summers are definitely getting hotter. The nights are getting warmer, and I'm going to talk about that more in a second, because that's even more maybe of a profound problem. So I was telling you, I moved here in 2011, still the hottest summer on record, 71 days, 100 degrees or above. I remember that summer because we first moved into an apartment. It had a pool, a shaded pool, and I remember sitting across that pool staring at my wife, who was staring at me. Why did you move us here? She was from Missouri. She'd actually been through 2 100-degree days in her life. And that summer we had 71. Why did you move us here? The 3rd hottest summer ever was last summer. The 4th hottest was 2 summers ago. Of the 20 warmest summers, almost half have happened this century. And as you would expect, more 100-degree days. We used to average 16 in the previous century. Now we average about 23. But here's the thing. The hots are getting hotter. The colds are getting colder. The rains are getting bigger. The hots are getting hotter. If you went from 1899 to 1999, and someone said today is a hot day in Texas, that means it's 100 degrees, by the way, in case you're new. When we say it's hot, 99? No, that's a summer day. 100? Okay, that's a hot day. 1 degree difference. So if you say it was going to be a hot day in Texas, it was going to be between 100 and 104, 87% of the time. That there was this range of hot here. It only got so hot. I mean, between 100 and 104. And a lot of this has to do the fact that we're close enough to the Gulf of Mexico and its moisture to moderate our temperatures just a little bit. So hot doesn't get super hot. This last summer, instead of 13% of the time where it got hotter than 104 or 105 or hotter, instead of that only happening 13% of the time, like it was in the previous century, this last summer it happened half the time. That every time it hit 100, half the time it was 105 or hotter. Now, if you're a gardener, I know this, you've noticed this, you can walk outside on a 100-degree day in the afternoon, look at your plants and go, yeah, they're not happy, but they're okay. At 105, that's not the same story. Plants, that seems to be the threshold. When you start getting over, especially 101, 102, plants really start to struggle. The hots are getting hotter. And that is going to be a problem for our plants. The number of nights where it stays 80 degrees or above is becoming more frequent. It's like we're living in Key West now, right? Is that back in 2011, the hottest year ever, 55 nights it stayed above 80 degrees for a low. And you can see I've highlighted all the ones that have happened this century. It's kind of a new phenomenon. And if you talk about nights where it only got down to 84 degrees, that's the average high in mid-May, by the way. Now we're talking about lows where it's 84 or above. That had only happened once a decade in the previous century. Now we're getting that once a year. And let's talk about real extreme, 85 degrees, an overnight low where it's only 85. That only happened once in the previous century. Yeah, it's happened 19 times in this century. And we went, by the way, this last summer, 377 hours where it stayed above 80 degrees. We didn't even get a night where it got below 80 degrees for basically over a week. The reason I'm talking about this is that many plants use a temperature trigger at the end of the day to close their stoma. They're using photosynthesis to do that, by the way. It's required. They can't do it unless they're generating sugars and power from that sun. So they can't close it once the sun goes down. If they don't get a temperature trigger to close their stoma, the stoma stays open, and it's opened all night, and now they dehydrate overnight. And they get structural damage overnight because that's a long period of dehydration. And remember, the nights are above 80 degrees, so they're suffering all night long. So you could be watering during the day, nursing that plant during the day. That isn't what's killing your plant in the middle of the summer. This is what's killing your plant in the middle of the summer. It's not getting cold enough at night. Plants are just like us. They have to get rid of their heat. And when the nights are this warm, they can't get rid of their heat, and they also can't close their stoma. So they are dehydrating and stressed from the heat at the same time. So this is a tremendous amount of plant stress. And now I'm talking about native plants. So while this is a phenomenon really located in the urban heat island, did I show you this? I don't think I talked about this. I'll go back, I promise. I'm gonna make you sit through all this twice. The urban heat island, that's DFW at night. Does anyone know what the yellow line is? That's Connecticut. So yeah, it's an urban heat island effect. The urban heat island effect is the size of Connecticut. So good luck trying to get out from under that. Okay, where were we? Summer. So this is becoming a big problem for our plants, that it's very warm at night. Now let's talk about fall. Good, a large crowd here. Can anyone tell me when fall starts, please? I've been here since 2011. Someone tell me. Oh. How many times have, so that thing that I was telling you about in spring, you can plant your greens, you can do that going into the fall, but unfortunately you have to do that like at the end of August, start of September, and just, I hope it doesn't get too hot. That has not worked for a couple of years in a row now, and it's because no one seems to know when fall starts, especially Mother Nature. And we've been getting some summer weather in October. So you'll have these tiny little transplants, hanging on to life, waiting for it to cool down, and they get slaughtered by heat like that. So that 3-season thing, I'm saying the third season is very much in jeopardy right now because fall is starting later. In fact, of all the seasons, this is the one changing the most. Of the top 10 warmest falls, 5 of the 6 have happened in a high schooler's lifetime, right? 5 of the 6 warmest falls ever in the last 16 years. Now I can sum all this up by calendar year, right? What you're looking at, I don't know if anyone has seen this before, warming stripes, but this is 120 stripes from 1899 to 2020. And if it's a blue line, that was a year of below normal temperatures. And a red line, a bright red line would be well above normal temperatures, and light blues and light reds are pretty much normal. So this was the Dust Bowl years. That was the 50s drought, which we should be thankful for, the drought of record for the Trinity Basin. City planners realized that we would run out of water if we got droughts like this ever again. So they started impounding lakes, not for flood control like they had been doing, but for the water, for drinking water. If they hadn't done that, guys, back in the 50s, because there was no way you were going to do it anytime after the 70s, the land would have been way too expensive at that time. But they did it in the 50s. If they had not, we would not have the DFW area as we know it. We would have ran out of water decades ago, but they impounded all this lakes. Did you know we had more artificial lake coverage, acreage than any city in America? Yeah, and that's because of that drought. Anyway, here's the last century. That's what's been happening. Of the 9 warmest years, they've all happened since 98. 2017 actually was the warmest year ever because it was warm really from start to end. I'm going to tell you what else happened in 2017 in a second. That was amazing. Another way to look at it is record highs, because record highs, record lows are pretty rare, especially now that we have a record book that goes back 125 years. And that's called the softening of the tails. The tailings, it gets harder and harder to get reached out there. Everything kind of starts hugging towards standard deviation of 1 over time. But anyway, we've had 116 record highs since the year 2000. We've only had 20 record lows. But since 2011, now not since 2000, but since 2011, since I moved here, we've had the warmest year, the warmest spring, warmest summer, warmest fall, warmest winter. Weather's getting more extreme. In 2011, we had the most intense single-year drought in record in the entire state, over the entire state of Texas. Now, the whole state, not just here, the entire state of Texas. It's the worst drought we've ever had, worst year of drought. 3 years later, we had the wettest year we've ever had in Texas. So, kind of depends when you moved here. Maybe it's a great state to grow stuff in. Maybe it's a terrible state. When I say weather is getting more extreme, I really only need to talk about the last 3 years in polling examples, just out of the last 3 years. So back in 2021, y'all might remember this, we had a little bit of a cold streak. It was right around Valentine's Day. Of course, the power went out and several $1 billion in economic loss. People died, by the way. Let's not forget that. They froze to death. On Valentine's Day, Mother Nature loves this kind of stuff. On the 14th, the high was 14. Isn't that sweet? By the way, the record low for Valentine's Day, in other words, the coldest morning ever on Valentine's Day was 18 degrees. So the high that day was below the record low. That had never happened before. And since it's, of course, it's Texas, it was 18 degrees on the 17th. That was the high. Go 6 days later, transpose that number, and it was 81. Did you know that we came out of that cold snap on the 20th? It was a freeze. It was like 22 degrees. That was the last freeze. Growing season started after that. That was it. Didn't get cold again. It got that cold, didn't get cold again. The very next year, we went through the second longest dry streak ever. During that period, the average high for that period was 100 degrees every day. That was the hottest streak of weather that long ever. And then how did that drought end? With deluge on August 12th and 13th over the night. DFW Airport got 9 inches of rain. And we didn't get another 100-degree day. That was it. Summer was over, basically. We went from record drought to record rain. And then there's last summer, the third hottest, fourth driest summer ever. By the way, August of last year was the second hottest month we've ever experienced. The record was the August of 2011, but this last August was the second hottest month we've ever had. It was not your imagination. Last August was particularly brutal. It really was. And that's where I lost my hollies. I had a row of Nellie Holly Stevens. They're very tough plants, by the way. I had them on my back fence row as a green space, a green fence, because I'm right next to the Cotton Belt Trail in North Richland Hills. And I lost those hollies. And I watered them religiously through the summer. I think what happened was the nights. I think I lost them during the nights. They were too warm. And now I built a trellis and I've planted a type of trumpet vine, Madame Galen trumpet vine that's a little bit more mannerly. That's going to be my green fence. I'm not going to invest that kind of money ever again. It just was brutal. Weather's getting more extreme. Most tornadoes in a year was 2015. We've had the 2 wettest years ever, 2015, 2018. We've had the 2 longest dry spells. The longest one was 2000, and then there was last summer. We've had the most 100-degree days in a year. We've also had the biggest snow in a day. We've had the earliest last freeze ever, twice. This is another standard deviation of 3 and more. This one, where the last freeze we got was in January 8th in 2017, the warmest year we've ever had. So that means you could have planted your tomato transplants on that afternoon of January 8th. You didn't have another freeze. Your tomato plants basically had almost 6 months to grow before the summer heat took off the blooms. Let's talk about what else happened in 2017. Harvey. That's the path of the Category 4 hurricane that hit Texas for the first time in 2 decades. Came on shore, did a loop past San Antonio and came back. Tropical storm this whole time and re-entered over by the Louisiana-Texas state line. That's where I was trapped at an Exxon gas station by the floodwater for 2 days while we were covering that story. It was overland. It never weakened below tropical storm status. That was the first time that had happened for such a long period of time. It was over 100 hours. Everything in green here, that represents 36 inches of rain, which is what we get in a year here, 36 inches of rain. They got it in 5 days. They got how much rain we get in a year, they got it in 5 days. And that much area all around Houston and all the way to the Louisiana state line and actually into Louisiana. That was the costliest weather event in Texas history. It was about $150 billion they figure in cost. It was the biggest tropical rain event in United States history in Nederland. That's just this little refinery town on the channel southeast of Beaumont heading into the Gulf. They got 60 inches of rain in 5 days, which is, that's a lot. If you look at 20-inch rain, that footprint was the size of West Virginia. Like I said, it stayed a tropical storm over land. The previous record was a little over 50 hours. This one did it for 117. And it's really a testimony just how big and powerful Harvey was. Harvey dropped 19 trillion gallons of rain over Texas. And that's actually a pretty good estimate because the entire lifetime of Harvey dumping rain on Texas was within inside the surveillance cones of several Dopplers at each moment. Doppler radars, the new systems, can look at the size and shape of the raindrop and do extraordinarily better, a very good job at estimating rainfall that way. And I know 19 trillion gallons of rain doesn't mean anything, so this is my math nerdiness coming out. I have to explain this. So let's take a trip on I-10. Let's go from Port Arthur, you just get inside Texas, big Texas flex. Beaumont, 23 miles, El Paso, 857. Because, we're Texas, it's big. You're gonna be in I-10 for a while. Take you more than a day to cross. Imagine doing that drive, and then on both sides of the interstate is 5 inches of standing water the entire way. Because 5 inches of standing water would be covering the entire state of Texas. That's how much rain came from Harvey. The United States had never seen a rain event like this. This happened in 2017. We've never seen anything like this before. Not on this scope, not on this scale. The reason is, we think, there was a lot of things about Harvey. Its trajectory brought it right past one of the many warm eddies that are circulating in the Gulf of Mexico during the summer. They can spin there for weeks and weeks on end. They're actually coming off of the Caribbean Sea, which is even warmer, and they just kind of spin around and linger into the Gulf until they unwind and cool themselves down. And Harvey went right over, actually, 2 of them, But the entire Gulf was very warm in 2017. We had been commenting already earlier that hurricane season that, we have to watch for any storm that got into the Gulf of Mexico, because the Gulf of Mexico was at record temperatures. Now, these records go back almost as long as our records go back, because these are shipping logs that actually they can reconstruct the basic water temperature of the surface and that body of water of that much of the Gulf. And 2017 was a record year. Harvey hit 2 eddies and then was over record water, and it got to a monster storm. Remember, hurricanes are nothing but heat transfer engines. They take the warm water around the equator, take all that heat out of that water, and then push it north towards the poles. That's what hurricanes, that's their job. And if it's over really warm water, it gets really strong. Harvey got huge and a Category 4 hurricane, and this is what happened last year in the Gulf. That's the black line. All these lines represent 1981 to 2024, and 2044, the new line is about right here. But anyway, what happened last summer is that you see there's no more gray lines between that line and all these gray lines. What you're looking at is not only the Gulf of Mexico, the warmest it's ever been, but far warmer than it's ever been. And Dr. Kim Woods at University of Arizona put this together for me, and she's going to update it, but that's how the Gulf was looking by the start of March. And actually, I'm going to interview her hopefully next week about the upcoming hurricane season and what the Gulf is doing. But we know the Gulf will be very warm. It was record warm last year. So our greatest fear is that we had a very active hurricane season last year, but we didn't know it because it was an El Nino year, and that means the hurricanes stay out in the Atlantic. This is an El Nino year, and the opposite happens. They come drawn into the United States. So it will be a very active season. All the early forecasts are for a very active hurricane season. And if one gets into the Gulf of Mexico, boy, I said that in 2017. If one gets into the Gulf of Mexico, we'll have to really watch it. So as bad as Harvey was, we will have to see if it's even going to be duplicated yet again this summer. This is going to be a great fear of mine here across hurricane season. It's not all gloom and doom. It's not. This is where everybody gets really, this is sad by now. I'm sad. As I remind you, we could go back 100 and they figure 65,000 years, and you're going to run into somebody a little shorter, but it's going to kind of look like us, By the way, forgive me if I offend anybody, we weren't white back then. There were no white people back then. Humans have been around for a long time, and if you accept the 165,000 year figure, that means we went through an ice age. Probably the greatest definition of humans, Homo sapien, is adaptability. We're very adaptive. And I've adapted. Let me show you what I've done in my backyard. That first big rain in May, 5 inches of rain on my first crop of spring greens that flooded my entire backyard and drowned every one of my plants. I put in raised beds. Every one of my beds that grows foods now is raised. These really intense summers now, I put out shade cloth. And I'll show you how I did it. But basically after 3:30, none of my beds that I grow food in have direct sun on them. They're all shaded. All shaded. From about mid-June to early September, no sun on my beds in the afternoon. Because of the longer growing season, I use frost cloth. I grow my transplants indoors. I learned to water and cover with cloth because I literally am getting as much as a month longer growing season just doing that. And sometimes I only have to do it twice, if maybe just once. So I've learned to work around freezes. And because of the warmer nights, I used to go out in the morning and water by hand my garden, because I think the best thing you put in your garden is your shadow. I go out in the evening now when there's still a little bit of sunlight, and I do never, of course, water the plant itself. I water the ground. and I water the ground, and what I'm using is a little bit of evaporational cooling. Still the sun's providing, it's evaporating that mist, and I am trying to lower the temperature in the bed and tell the plant to close its stoma, go to bed, wake up tomorrow. That's what I'm trying to do. And I'm doing that on nights where I'm following the forecast, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to stay above 80 degrees tonight. I'm going to go water here at the end of the day. This is the yard I inherited, grass. There's no grass in my backyard anymore. And I had to build 2 French drains, one on each side, of which my sons still remember that project in a very bitter way. So I have a pergola in the middle of my backyard along with a pool. And what I did is I ringed my entire backyard with these poles, 16-foot aluminum poles, buried about 3 feet down with 2 bags of concrete, and then supported. And then there's a wire that connects all the way around the perimeter of my yard. So I can put a shade cloth anywhere. I tie it to this pergola and to that wire, and I can place it anywhere I want. And I put a series of them out, so that's how I can get the sun off of my beds during the summer. No afternoon sun on any of my beds my raised beds where I grow food after 3:30. So I was in a tornado at 7, and it was like this life-changing event. And I really think we're imprinted what we do for a living really early on. You know, I'm a perfect example. I was in this tornado that is still to this day, I think, the deadliest one ever to hit Mount Clemens in Michigan. It hit Mount Clemens, Michigan. And it hit a row of farmhouses right behind the ridge of our house. We lived on the base. And it wiped out all 3 of those houses. And one of those houses was a child and a mother, and they both perished in the storm. That child was in the same grade at the school with my sister, who's older than me. And it was the first funeral I ever went to. And you can imagine at 7, seeing a tornado, not really knowing that was, and then a funeral, and that this kid who I knew was dead. That was a pretty dramatic experience, and I just remember sitting in that funeral and looking at that little casket and just going, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know what I'm going to do for my living. I'm going to grow up, and I'm not going to have any kids get killed by a tornado. And I've kept that promise to a 7-year-old for 60 years now. That's exactly what I did. Now, I would think that would be enough for you guys. You know, I have a lifetime commitment to protect you during severe weather, but it turns out I have to be popular as well. When did this happen? Why are we all back to junior high? So if you can like me on Facebook and Twitter, I appreciate it. No, my boss would appreciate it. That's ocean temperatures, and we can talk about that if you want. That's probably the biggest challenge it is to forecasting now, because forecasting models are based on what has happened in the past. And the computer model, I was telling you, all that observation data is coming in, and the computer's going through, wait a minute, I've seen this before, and it goes back in time and goes, whoa, okay, then that happened. Now let me tell you what this is going to happen. And it uses the past to help us predict the future. Nothing in the past looked like that. The ocean water develops patterns of weather, and especially upper air patterns that dominate our weather and certainly our seasons. And what has changed is that suddenly, and I do mean suddenly, water temperatures have gotten very high, and they seem to be kind of holding. Now, they've come down a little bit since last summer, thank goodness. And we're really waiting to see what happens when we kind of change some of the bigger weather patterns. The ocean might cool back down. Let's hope so. Let's hope this is just an anomaly. But what it's really doing is making weather forecasting really difficult right now, because the models are looking at what's happened in the past, and in the past this wasn't like this. So we're getting some kind of screwy results. So that I'm already telling you why I'm wrong. It's the ocean temperatures, not me. Does anyone, I threw a lot of numbers and facts and figures at you. Does anyone have any questions at all? Yes.
How does El Nino and La Nina affect the weather and the weather patterns?
It probably has the biggest effect on our hurricane season. Because if we can go into a hurricane season where we're in a La Nina, it kind of holds off the worst of it. I mean, El Nino, sorry. And we're in the opposite this summer, so we think that's why we're going to have a very active pattern. So that's usually one of the first things I look at when we start talking about hurricane season. And since hurricanes are such high impact events, I would say that that's probably the biggest thing. But, you know, we can get a pretty mild winter because we could be in a La Nina, which are nice. So they will even affect our winters, but I would say at hurricanes that I watch it the most.
I'm in a group that does a lot of recommendations for native plants because native plants have learned to live in our climate and therefore will outsurvive the exotics. But if the changes are happening so quickly, it would seem that perhaps the natives would have difficulty making the adjustment.
Right.
And we might want to relook at some of those
Yeah.
recommendations.
So having been in over a year now in a conversation with several people about this, you know, people who know a lot more about plants and botany than me, their recommendation is that we look just west, you know, look just west of us, and that might be a better indication of what might become native here. I think a lot of our native plants probably will be fine. I know the Texas Tree Foundation is kind of struggling right now on what trees to recommend, because as you know, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. Yeah. And we're talking about a tree that's going to be providing us shade 30 years from now. You kind of want to plant the right tree for how it's changing. And, you know, they used to recommend like over 60, 70 trees, and now they're recommending about 10. Do you want to know the 10? Everybody always asks, so I had to go put it on a note. There was no way I was going to memorize anything. Bur oak, cedar elm, chickpeak oak, I never say that right. Common, what?
Chickpea.
Thank you. Common persimmon, live oak, Mexican buckeye, Mexican plum, Monterey oak, pecan, Texas mountain laurel, and a Texas red oak. Now, I would give pause on the red oak and the live oak because of oak wilt. But all those others, oak wilt, yeah, it's been spreading all the way from Michigan down here now. If you want to know the power of oak wilt, go to the River Oaks community in Fort Worth, just off I-30. There is a beautiful, a little suburban group there. It's a suburb that was built, it would have been a very high-end subdivision in the 60s, so it's mostly ranch homes, but really big ones and very well-designed ones. The whole thing was completely canopied in oak, completely canopied in oak. Almost all those oaks are gone. They all died in about a 2-year period. And you can walk around in that whole neighborhood, and everybody has the same thing in their front yard, a stump about like that. And it is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. River oaks. No, it's here in Fort Worth. And it was one of the first places oak wilt really showed up and terrorized an entire neighborhood. Well, yes?
What kind of plants would you recommend for that hot part of summer? That
Natives, obviously.
like garden vegetable type?
Oh, you know, okra. You can grow okra. There's a lot of squashes and watermelons. Melons you can grow too. Yeah, I mean there are. There's a summer crop, believe me. Yeah, I know. Medallion. So you take your okra, when it's still about 3 inches long, and you cut it in little medallions, and you quick fry it in a little olive oil, and it doesn't taste anything like okra.
Well, I love okra.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, eggplant. Nightshades. Yes, sir.
I know we concentrated on Texas, but Texas compared with the rest of the country, are they also seeing a big significant change in the weather?
Yes. Yeah, we are not alone. We are not alone, I dare say, globally, but every latitude, every in proximity you are to an ocean water body, of course, changes a lot of these scenarios. But everyone is being deeply affected, have seen significant differences, especially in the last 2 decades. I don't want to take any more of you guys' time, really. This is...
So Jeff, if
Yeah.
I may, are you able to stay and take questions after?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to make a couple quick announcements because I know people have to go. First and foremost, I want to thank you again for coming out, but also let you guys know that Environmental Services is giving out native plant seedlings tonight. So make sure on your way out, stop by the table and see me to get your seedling on your way out. One of the options we have today is Mexican buckeye.
Yeah.
On the list Jeff just mentioned. So definitely stop
Great
by and
plant.
see me there. Second thing, wanted to make you guys all aware that in the fall, the town is actually going to be doing a green waste pilot program. So currently in Flower Mound, even if you bag your leaves in paper bags and set them out by the curb, that's all going to the landfill. So council is looking into if residents are willing to pay the extra fee that it would cost to divert that from the landfill and send it to be recycled and turned into mulch. So keep an ear out for that. That's going to be coming this fall, and they are really going to be needing resident feedback on if that's something y'all want. So please make sure and make your voice heard in the fall when that comes up. And I swear I had a third announcement, but it'll come to me. Or if you put your email on our email list, I can send that out via an email when we get there. So Jeff is available to take questions afterward, but again, just want to thank him so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.